Imagine turning a faucet on full blast, right? But the water just trickles out of the attached garden hose.
Yeah, that classic frustrating trickle.
Exactly. You check the source, the pressure's perfectly high. But somewhere down the line, the system itself is just failing to facilitate the flow.
Right. The pipe is the problem, not the water supply.
Yes. And for millions of people who have crossed that 60-year threshold, this is exactly what is happening inside their own circulatory systems.
It's a fantastic analogy because, you drink your recommended 8 glasses of water a day.
You dutifully carry around your giant stainless steel tumbler.
Right. You do everything by the book. But you are effectively dying of thirst from the inside out.
Because your internal plumbing has simply stopped responding to the water you give it.
And that systemic failure of utilization is really where the true crisis of biological aging begins.
Wild to think about.
It is. There is a massive, often ignored chasm between merely ingesting water and actually hydrating at the cellular level.
Right, because when we're young, those two things are basically synonymous, right?
Exactly. You drink, your vessels respond, your tissues hydrate, it's automatic. But past 60, that automatic synchronization just shatters.
And understanding exactly why it shatters, and honestly, more importantly, how to force it back into synchronization, well, that's our mission for today's deep dive.
It's a crucial topic for anyone feeling that unexplained fatigue.
Absolutely. We are unpacking a profound shift in medical perspective brought forward by Dr. William Lai. We've got a stack of his source materials, his clinical observations, and a really fascinating self-experiment he conducted.
Yeah, we should clarify. Dr. Lee isn't some fringe wellness guru on the internet.
No, not at all. He is an ER surgeon with 42 years of high-stakes, acute medical experience.
Right. He spent over 4 decades treating the human body in its absolute most critical states of failure.
But the genesis of his most impactful realization, it didn't actually happen in the trauma bay.
No, it happened in his standard clinical practice and then ultimately right in his own living room.
Which makes it so relatable. For years, he was fielding this very specific, very repetitive set of complaints from his older patients.
They weren't coming in with acute trauma. They were coming in with this chronic, creeping fatigue.
Yeah, they described having heavy legs. They described poor, sluggish circulation.
They just had this pervasive, deeply frustrating feeling that their bodies were refusing to keep up despite their rigorous efforts to stay active and, hydrated.
And as an ER surgeon, his training dictates a certain objective detachment. You hear the symptoms, you run the panels, you look for the pathology.
Standard medical procedure.
Right. But the real catalyst of this entire protocol is that Dr. Light turned 60 himself.
And suddenly the objective became intensely subjective.
Exactly. He woke up one day and he felt the heavy legs. He felt the sluggish circulation.
He was no longer just analyzing this phenomenon on a medical chart. He was trapped inside it.
And that transition, from physician to patient, it forces a radical shift in methodology.
It really does. When it's your own physiology that feels like it's dragging through molasses, you don't just dismiss it as, getting older.
No, you start aggressively investigating the root molecular causes.
And what he noted, and this really defies so much conventional dietary advice, is that simply increasing his intake of plain water did absolutely nothing to alleviate that heaviness.
If you're listening right now and you've ever felt that exact frustration, chugging water to clear brain fog or wake up your tired limbs.
Right, only to just end up running to the bathroom more often without feeling any actual relief.
Yes, this is the biological explanation for that. Dr. Lee realized that the aging cardiovascular system becomes structurally and chemically blunted to plain water.
The problem was never the volume. The problem is the reactivity of the cardiovascular system itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in a young body, water creates hydrostatic pressure, right?
Exactly. And the body's internal mechanisms utilize that fluid to plump up cells, actively move blood, and flush out the extremities.
But in an aging body, those internal signaling mechanisms are severely dulled.
They're almost muted. The water just passes through the digestive tract and is excreted by the kidneys, but it never fully engages that circulatory network.
So Dr. Lee leveraged his medical background and essentially turned his own kitchen into a laboratory.
A very methodical laboratory.
Right. He took the most fundamental daily habit we possess, drinking water, and systematically began altering its chemical composition.
He didn't want to overhaul his entire life. He just wanted to see if he could subtly tweak the input to force his aging plumbing to wake up.
He tested over 60 different powders, botanical extracts, Natural ingredients, complex combinations.
And we really have to pause and appreciate the sheer clinical rigor of isolating 60 different variables on yourself.
Seriously. And the data from his self-experiment was stark. The vast majority of those 60 additives did absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all. A few of them, particularly the ones heavily processed or reliant on artificial sweeteners, they actually exacerbated the sluggishness.
But hidden in that extensive trial and error process were exactly 5 specific additions.
Just 5.
Just 5. And these weren't yielding marginal invisible changes that require a blood test to confirm.
No, these 5 specific compounds created undeniable, immediately measurable improvements in his circulation and his physical responsiveness.
We are talking about the heavy legs vanishing, the cold extremities warming up.
A circulatory system that actually felt awake and dynamic again.
So the core thesis we are extracting from his work today completely flips the script on aging safely.
Maintaining your circulation isn't about hydration volume. It's not about drinking gallons.
Right. It is entirely about strategically introducing specific biological compounds that act as chemical commands.
Commands that literally force your vascular plumbing to respond to the water you are providing.
The water is merely the delivery vehicle.
Exactly. These 5 compounds are the precise biological instructions telling the aging vascular tissue exactly what to do with that vehicle.
So let's get right into the architecture of those instructions. Because before we can even talk about the rheology of the blood, how it flows, how thick it is.
Well, we have to confront the physical state of the pipes themselves.
Exactly. If you have a damaged, compromised pipe, pushing more fluid through it is a recipe for disaster.
It's counterproductive. So our first major intervention deals entirely with rebuilding structural integrity.
Which is a vital starting point. Let's look at the histology of aging blood vessels.
Right, because as we age past 60, the physical walls of our vascular network undergo a fundamental degenerative transformation.
It's not a pretty picture inside those vessels.
No, it's not. The tunica intima, that's the innermost layer, and the tunica media, the muscular middle layer, they literally begin to degrade.
The elastin fibers that allow the vessel to stretch and recoil, they become fragmented.
And the collagen becomes cross-linked and incredibly stiff.
So the vessel walls literally get thinner, yet simultaneously more rigid.
Yes, they lose their dynamic elasticity. Arteriosclerosis isn't just about plaque building up inside the vessel.
Right, that's what everyone thinks of the clogs.
Exactly, but it's also about the vessel wall itself turning from a pliable rubber tube into a stiff, brittle lead pipe.
And if you want blood to flow with minimal resistance, you require vessels that can easily expand to accommodate the pulse of the heart.
And then seamlessly contract to push the blood forward.
So, how do we reverse the stiffening of a biological pipe? Dr. Lai's research points to a combination that, honestly on the surface, sounds entirely unserious.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Right. If you're sitting there rolling your eyes because I'm about to tell you to put cucumber and mint in your water,
Yeah.
I completely understand.
It sounds like a gimmick you get charged $20 for at a pretentious day spa.
Exactly. But the clinical data reveals a profound structural mechanism at play here.
We have to divorce the ingredient from its spa water reputation and look at the actual phytochemistry.
Let's do it. What's the secret inside the cucumber?
Well, cucumbers are one of the most abundant natural sources of a compound called silica.
Silica, like sand.
Well, silicon dioxide, yes. It's a trace mineral that is absolutely vital for the synthesis and cross-linking of collagen and elastin.
So it's basically the biological mortar between the cellular bricks.
That is an incredibly accurate way to visualize it. Silica reinforces the connective tissue matrix that physically holds the vascular walls together.
And as we get older, we run low on this mortar.
Precisely. When you are deficient in silica, which becomes increasingly common as our digestive absorption wanes with age, that structural matrix weakens.
So introducing highly bioavailable silica back into the system provides the raw materials necessary for the vessel to repair its own structural elasticity.
And the source material cites a fascinating study from the Journal of Nutrition, Health, and Aging to back this up.
They didn't just ask people how they felt, right? They actually measured it.
Yes, they measured arterial flexibility clinically. They took a cohort of older adults, significantly increased their daily silica intake, and over a 12-week period, recorded a 12% improvement in arterial flexibility.
Wow, a 12% improvement.
In the context of vascular medicine, a 12% reversal in structural rigidity over a single season is a massive physiological shift.
Because that directly translates into reduced shear stress on the arterial walls, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It means the left ventricle of the heart doesn't have to pump nearly as hard against a rigid system.
It lowers the baseline blood pressure naturally
Hmm.
because the system can finally absorb and distribute the hydrostatic force.
But the protocol isn't just cucumber, it's an infusion of cucumber paired specifically with fresh mint.
Right, and the mint isn't just there as a flavor enhancer to mask the vegetable taste.
Far from it. The mint is performing an entirely different but complementary function.
Mint leaves contain high concentrations of a phenolic compound called rosmarinic acid.
Yes. So while the silica from the cucumber is physically rebuilding the structural walls and restoring the elastin, the rosmarinic acid is actively acting on the smooth muscle cells of the vessel.
Prompting them to relax. So it's a dual action mechanism. If we go back to our garden hose scenario, the cucumber is repairing the degraded sun-baked rubber so it isn't brittle anymore.
And the mint is essentially walking over to the nozzle and turning it to a wider, more open spray setting.
Reducing the overall pressure and resistance of the flow. That's brilliant.
It's repairing the pipe and simultaneously widening the pipe. The source material backs this up with a study from the journal Phytomedicine.
What did they find?
They tracked older adults supplementing with rosmarinic acid and found a 15% reduction in total vascular resistance in just 2 weeks.
Wait, 2 weeks? That seems incredibly fast for an over-the-counter botanical intervention.
Really does.
Usually when we talk about dietary changes, we're told to wait months to see the needle move.
Well, the rapid timeline is due to the mechanism of action. Silica takes 12 weeks because it has to physically rebuild tissue. It takes time to synthesize collagen.
But rosmarinic acid works on the signaling pathways of the smooth muscle.
Exactly. It triggers an active relaxation response, which can occur much faster than structural tissue regeneration.
But let's get deep into the preparation here, because the methodology of extraction is where people usually fail.
It's so easy to get this wrong.
Right. You can't just hack up a cucumber, toss a whole mint sprig into a glass of ice water, take a sip, and expect a 15% drop in vascular resistance.
No, the biochemistry of extraction requires very specific rules.
Let's lay out those parameters. They're pretty strict.
Very strict. First, the source dictates you must use half of a medium cucumber, and it must be thinly sliced to maximize the surface area exposed to the water.
But the most critical caveat is that the cucumber must be organic.
Yes, this is non-negotiable.
Why is organic the absolute non-negotiable factor here?
Because the overwhelming majority of that vital silica is sequestered directly in the dark green skin of the cucumber, not the watery flesh. You have to leave the skin on.
Oh, and if you use conventionally grown cucumbers,
You are taking a skin that has been heavily treated with agricultural pesticides and soaking it directly into your primary hydration source.
you're essentially brewing a low-dose pesticide tea.
Exactly. Which triggers systemic inflammation, the exact opposite of our goal here.
Okay, so half a thinly sliced organic cucumber with the skin intact. Then you take 10 to 12 fresh mint leaves.
But again, you don't just drop them in whole, you have to physically disrupt the cellular structure of the leaf.
Right, you must gently crush or tear the leaves between your fingers before adding them to the filtered water.
Mint leaves store their rosmarinic acid and essential oils in microscopic trichomes on the surface of the leaf.
So if you don't mechanically break those structures, the oils just remain trapped.
And the water cannot extract them.
You combine the sliced cucumber and the crushed mint in a pitcher of filtered water. And then comes the hardest part for most people.
Patience.
Yes, patience. You must let the mixture steep in the refrigerator for a minimum of 30 minutes.
However, the source explicitly notes that a full overnight steep yields the maximum concentration of active compounds.
Cold water extraction is a slow process, isn't it?
It is. The water needs sustained contact time to pull the silica and the rosmarinic acid out of the plant matrices and into solution.
The protocol is to drink at least 3 glasses of this specific infusion throughout the day. And there is a freshness constraint.
You have to make a new batch every single morning.
So you can't just prep a massive 5-gallon jug on Sunday and drink it for a week.
No, because the compounds are volatile and degrade over time once extracted into the water.
If you want the active biological effects, you need the active phytochemicals.
Which means daily, fresh preparation. Consistency is the primary driver of the results here.
Right, so we've addressed the physical infrastructure. The structural decay has been patched with silica, and the vascular resistance has been lowered by the rosmarinic acid.
The pipes are wide and flexible again.
But if the fluid flowing through those newly repaired pipes is the consistency of thick sludge, The flexibility doesn't actually solve the circulation problem.
Not at all. We need to look at the rheology, the actual flow and consistency of the blood itself.
Which leads us directly into Dr. Lai's next crucial intervention. This one is designed to address the chemical signaling within the blood and the physical viscosity of the cells.
The combination is lemon and raw ginger water.
This one feels like reaching into a traditional apothecary.
Yeah.
It's that classic remedy you get handed when you have a terrible winter cold.
It is, but Dr. Lee's research proves that modern hematology completely validates this specific combination.
Especially for aging adults who are silently suffering from sticky blood and broken chemical signaling.
We are dealing with two massive compounded cardiovascular hurdles that emerge almost universally after the age of 60.
What's the first hurdle?
The first is a catastrophic drop in endothelial chemical signaling.
Yeah.
And this is where the lemon plays its critical role.
Lemons are, of course, an abundant source of ascorbic acid, or vitamin C.
Now, the general public views vitamin C almost exclusively through the lens of immune function, right? Fighting off viruses.
Yeah, you take it when you feel a sniffle coming on.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
in the realm of vascular medicine, vitamin C serves a completely different, absolutely vital function.
It's acting as a chemical catalyst, right? It's fueling the production of something the source refers to as the vascular master switch.
What's fascinating here is that this master switch is a molecule called nitric oxide, or NO.
Nitric oxide.
Yes. Nitric oxide is a transient, incredibly powerful gas that is naturally synthesized and released by the endothelial cells.
And those are the cells that make up that single-cell layer lining the entire interior of your blood vessels.
Correct. When the endothelium releases nitric oxide, it sends a direct chemical command to the surrounding smooth muscles to instantly relax.
It's the literal chemical trigger that allows vasodilation.
When the NO is released, the vessels widen, and fresh oxygenated blood can finally rush down into the hands, the feet, the brain, and the myocardium of the heart.
But the biological tragedy of aging is that these endothelial cells take a massive beating over the decades.
They really do. They accumulate oxidative stress. They become dysfunctional.
And as a direct result, your natural baseline production of nitric oxide just plummets.
The signaling pathway degrades. The master switch essentially gets rusted in the off position.
This is exactly why you can drink massive amounts of water and still have cold hands, chronic fatigue, and that creeping brain fog.
The fluid is in your system, but the blood vessels are entirely failing to receive the chemical signal to open up and deliver it.
So how does vitamin C fix this?
Vitamin C is the biological intervention that forces the synthesis of nitric oxide back online.
It acts as a vital cofactor for the enzyme endothelial nitric oxide synthase, right?
Yes, the actual machine that makes the NO. Furthermore, vitamin C is a potent antioxidant.
So it aggressively scavenges those oxidative free radicals that are actively destroying whatever nitric oxide your body does manage to produce.
Exactly. The source brings in hard clinicals data from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition to support this.
What did the data show?
They analyzed older adult populations and found that those with higher optimized vitamin C intake possessed 23% more bioavailable nitric oxide in their bloodstream compared to those with low intake.
A 23% increase in the master signaling molecule simply by providing the requisite biochemical fuel.
That is a massive upregulation of vascular communication.
So we squeeze the fresh lemon juice into the water to secure that vitamin C, clear the oxidative rust, and boost the nitric oxide signal.
But a wide open pipe doesn't help if the traffic inside is jammed.
Right. We have to introduce the raw ginger. Let's get into the hematology of platelet function.
This is where we shift from vascular signaling to the physical consistency of the blood itself.
While the lemon is busy widening the vessels, the ginger is directly altering how the blood cells interact with one another.
Raw ginger contains heavily concentrated bioactive phenolic compounds known as gingerols and shogels.
And these specific compounds exert a profound inhibitory effect on blood platelets.
Now, normally we want our platelets to function perfectly.
Right. If you slice your finger chopping vegetables, the platelets activate, they get sticky, they aggregate, and they form a clot to prevent you from bleeding out.
It's a vital survival mechanism. It is essential for hemostasis.
However, the pathology of aging, combined with decades of systemic inflammation and poor circulation, causes these platelets to become chronically hyperactive.
They lose their smooth, streamlined shape. They become prickly and highly adhesive.
They begin spontaneously clumping together inside the vessels, even when there is no bleeding to stop.
The source material vividly describes this as the blood becoming chronically sticky.
And when hyperactive platelets aggregate, the overall viscosity of the blood skyrockets.
The flow becomes sluggish, and, terrifyingly, your risk of developing deep vein thrombosis or other dangerous internal clots multiplies.
Imagine a massive multi-lane highway. If all the cars maintain their lanes, keep their distance, and move at a steady speed, traffic flows perfectly.
But if a few cars suddenly get stuck together, they form a blockade.
The cars behind them pile up. The entire highway, no matter how wide it is, completely grinds to a halt.
The gingerols and show-gels in the ginger act like a repellent coating on the cars, ensuring they smoothly bounce off each other instead of sticking and causing a jam.
It's a great visual. The mechanism is actually quite close to that, right?
It is. The compounds in ginger actively inhibit the thromboxane A2 pathway.
Which is the primary biochemical signal that tells platelets to change shape and stick together.
Exactly. By blocking that specific pathway, the ginger maintains the smooth, non-adhesive profile of the platelets.
The source references a rigorous clinical trial published in Thrombosis Research.
They administered approximately 2 grams of raw ginger daily to participants over an 8-week period.
And the clinical result was a measured 19% reduction in platelet aggregation.
19% less clumping.
That translates to significantly smoother, vastly safer, and much more efficient blood flow reaching the extremities.
So how do we optimally prepare this declumping master switch tonic to ensure we actually absorb these delicate compounds?
Again, the pharmacokinetics of preparation dictate the success of the intervention.
You begin by taking 1 whole, fresh lemon, not a plastic squeezed bottle of preserved juice from the pantry.
No, it has to be fresh. And you squeeze that fresh juice into a large glass of filtered water.
Next, you take a 1-inch piece of raw ginger root.
And the source is explicit here. It must be peeled.
It must be peeled to expose the fibrous interior where the gingerols are highly concentrated.
You then slice it into very thin coins to maximize the exposed surface area.
Or, if you want a more aggressive, potent extraction, you can finely grate the ginger root directly into the lemon water.
But once again, we encounter the extraction delay. You cannot just mix it and chug it on your way out the door.
The kinetics of cold water extraction require time. You must allow the raw ginger to steep in the lemon water for an absolute minimum of 15 minutes.
The water needs that window to permeate the cellular walls of the ginger root.
And leach the volatile gingerols and show-gels into the solution.
The protocol for when to drink this is arguably the most important detail.
It really is.
The source mandates drinking this first thing in the morning, specifically on an empty stomach. Why does the absence of food completely alter the efficacy?
It's entirely about the rate of gastric emptying and maximum intestinal absorption.
Okay, walk us through that.
When you consume this tonic on a completely empty stomach, there is no complex food matrix, no proteins, no heavy fats, no dietary fibers competing for absorption.
So the water, the vitamin C, and the bioactive ginger compounds pass almost instantaneously through the stomach lining.
And through the upper intestine directly into the systemic circulation.
It's a direct, unimpeded pipeline to the bloodstream.
Exactly. If you were to drink this during or immediately after eating a heavy breakfast of eggs and toast,
The medicinal compounds get trapped inside the digesting food mass.
the absorption rate slows to a crawl, the compounds get heavily diluted by digestive acids, and the acute vascular impact is almost entirely lost.
Dr. Lee's recommendation is to aim for 2 dedicated servings of this tonic daily.
One immediately upon waking on that empty stomach, and a second dose in the mid-afternoon to maintain the antiplatelet effect.
And a practical tip directly from the source. If you are not accustomed to the intense, fiery bite of raw ginger, do not force yourself to drink a hyper-concentrated dose on day 1.
Good advice. Start with a very small, thin slice.
Allow your palate and your gastric lining to adapt over a week or 2 and slowly graduate to the full 1-inch piece.
It is an incredibly elegant synergy.
The vitamin C in the lemon aggressively upregulates the nitric oxide to force the pathways open.
And the gingerols actively prevent the blood cells from forming microscopic traffic jams, allowing the blood to surge smoothly through those newly opened pathways.
Okay, so the lemon is providing the raw cofactor material, the vitamin C, to help your aging endothelial cells produce more of that nitric oxide master switch on their own.
Right.
But what if the endothelial cells are so damaged that they simply can't keep up with production, even with the vitamin C?
That's a very real scenario for a lot of people over 60.
What if there was a way to completely bypass the body's broken manufacturing plant and just flood the entire system with massive prepackaged amounts of nitric oxide instantly.
That exact biochemical bypass is the focus of Dr. Lai's next major intervention.
And it involves a dietary component that has utterly dominated cardiovascular research over the last 10 years. Beetroot juice.
The source notes that beetroot juice was the intervention Dr. Lai initially viewed with the most skepticism.
Really. He almost bypassed it completely in his self-experiment, assuming it was an overhyped trend.
Yet, out of the 60 variables he tested, this single ingredient ended up producing the most violent, rapid, and undeniable physiological shift in his own body.
And the mechanism driving that massive shift is a class of compounds known as dietary nitrates.
Botanically, beets pull heavy concentrations of nitrogen from the soil and store it in their root system as inorganic nitrates.
They are arguably the single most dense, naturally occurring source of dietary nitrates available to us.
But let's clarify the terminology here because people get easily confused.
We just spent the last 20 minutes establishing how critical nitric oxide is for vascular health. But you were talking about dietary nitrates.
Right. What is the biological bridge between consuming a nitrate and getting the nitric oxide gas we actually need?
Exactly. How does that conversion happen?
The bridge is a stunningly complex and rapid biological chain reaction called the enterosalivary circulation pathway.
Enterosalivary.
Yes. When you consume a high concentration of dietary nitrates via beetroot juice, your body begins a sequential conversion process to turn those stable nitrates directly into volatile nitric oxide.
But the truly fascinating aspect of this pathway is where the initial conversion occurs.
It doesn't happen deep in your liver or your lower intestine.
The reaction begins the very microsecond the liquid enters your mouth.
Explain that because it sounds like science fiction. The chemical reaction is happening on my tongue.
Literally, yes. You harbor massive colonies of specific, beneficial commensal bacteria that live exclusively in the deep crypts on the surface of your tongue.
These specific oral bacteria possess nitrate reductase enzymes.
So the moment the beetroot juice washes over the back of your tongue, these bacteria instantly begin stripping oxygen atoms away,
reducing the dietary nitrates into a slightly more active compound called nitrites.
So the bacteria in our mouth are doing the heavy lifting before we even swallow.
Exactly. You then swallow those newly formed nitrates.
And when they hit the highly acidic environment of your stomach acid, they undergo a second rapid chemical reduction,
finally transforming into the master signaling molecule, nitric oxide gas.
From the stomach lining, that nitric oxide diffuses directly and rapidly into the systemic bloodstream.
This bypasses the damaged endothelial cells entirely.
We aren't asking the damaged blood vessels to make the nitric oxide.
No, we are manufacturing it in our mouths and stomachs and delivering it directly to them.
It is a profound pharmacological bypass. Because the enterosalivary pathway works so incredibly fast, the physiological results are practically instantaneous.
The source emphasizes that this is not a take this supplement and check back in 3 months scenario.
The data on the speed of this reaction is staggering. The source cites a landmark study published in the journal Hypertension.
Researchers took participants and administered a single 250 milliliter dose of beetroot juice.
Within an incredibly short window of just 3 hours, they measured a statistically significant precipitous drop in systemic blood pressure,
alongside a massive 20% increase in blood flow specifically directed to the peripheral muscles.
20% more vascular perfusion in under 180 minutes.
For a patient over 60 who has been battling the sensation of concrete blocks strapped to their legs every time they try to climb a flight of stairs,
that immediate 20% influx of highly oxygenated, nutrient-dense blood fundamentally alters their mechanical capability.
But it's not just a fleeting 3-hour trick.
No, the source also looks at the compounding long-term athletic implications for the aging body.
They reference a prominent study conducted by the University of Exeter and published in the Journal of Applied Physiology.
They tracked a cohort of older adults who incorporated daily beetroot juice consumption over a 2-week period.
The measured outcome was a 16% improvement in overall exercise endurance.
That 16% enhancement in endurance is not driven by building larger muscles.
It is driven entirely by mitigating the oxygen cost of exercise.
Because the blood vessels are profoundly widened by the nitric oxide, the heart can deliver the exact same amount of oxygen to the working muscles with significantly less effort.
The cardiovascular system becomes brutally efficient.
We know the biological pathway is sound, and we know the clinical results are fast, but we have to dive deep into the specific preparation and dosing protocols for beetroot juice.
Because if you just go out, buy a massive jug of pure beet juice and chug a pint of it, you're going to encounter some severe problems.
You absolutely must respect the potency of the extract.
The standardized protocol is to measure out approximately 100 milliliters of pure, cold-pressed, no sugar added beetroot juice.
You must then pour that 100 milliliters into a much larger glass containing roughly 300 milliliters of filtered water.
I can easily see someone looking at those instructions and questioning the logic.
Right. If the pure juice is the medicine, why am I actively watering down the medicine? Doesn't diluting it make it weaker?
It makes it manageable, which is entirely different from making it weaker.
The source provides two critical, distinct physiological reasons for the dilution protocol. What's the first?
First, concentrated, unadulterated beetroot juice is intensely rich in oxalates and rapidly fermentable carbohydrates.
So dropping a highly concentrated dose into an older, potentially sensitive gastric environment can trigger severe
Nausea, cramping, and acute gastrointestinal distress. Diluting it heavily in water drastically softens the impact on the mucosal lining of the stomach.
making it gentle and easily digestible. And the second reason for the dilution.
The second reason is purely pharmacokinetic. It dictates how your body processes the nitrate payload.
If you throw back a concentrated shot of pure juice, your oral bacteria and stomach acid process it all simultaneously.
You get a massive, instantaneous spike in blood nitric oxide levels, which forces the vessels wide open.
But that spike drops off a cliff almost as quickly as it arrived.
By diluting the juice into a large volume of water and sipping it slowly over time, you are engineering a sustained, metered release of nitrates.
You're creating an IV drip effect rather than a syringe plunge.
You want elevated, stable nitric oxide levels supporting your vessels throughout the entire day, not just a massive rush for a 30-minute window.
Precisely. Pacing the delivery system optimizes the therapeutic window.
The source also notes a practical alternative for those who cannot source quality bottled juice.
You can simply take one medium, whole raw beet, boil or roast it until soft, and blend it directly with water to create a fresh, whole food sustention.
Timing is also an explicit factor here. When is the optimal window to consume the diluted juice?
You must align the consumption with your physiological demands.
The protocol dictates drinking the mixture in the morning, specifically timing it about 2 hours prior to your most strenuous physical activity of the day.
Whether that is a structured gym workout, a brisk neighborhood walk, or an afternoon of heavy gardening.
Why specifically 2 hours?
Because the enterosalivary conversion pathway from mouth bacteria to stomach acid reduction to bloodstream diffusion takes approximately 2 hours to reach absolute peak plasma concentration.
At that exact 2-hour mark, your nitric oxide levels will be maxed out.
Your blood vessels will be at their absolute widest dilation, and your muscles will receive the maximum possible volume of oxygen-rich blood right when the physical demand begins.
Okay, before we move on, we absolutely must broadcast a crucial, slightly graphic note from the source material.
Oh, right. Or else we're going to be responsible for some terrifying emergency room visits.
Ah, yes, the Bettinen phenomenon.
Right. If you follow this protocol and start consuming dense beetroot juice every day, within 24 to 48 hours, you will likely notice that your urine and potentially your stool have turned a shocking shade of bright red or deep crimson.
It looks exactly like gross hematuria bleeding in the urinary tract.
Which is understandably terrifying for anyone, let alone an older adult.
But the source explicitly stresses that it is entirely 100% harmless.
The deep red color of a beet comes from a highly stable natural pigment called betin.
The human digestive tract cannot fully break down bettinin, so the excess pigment simply passes straight through the kidneys and the bowels,
Dyeing everything in its path. It's just biological food coloring.
In fact, if you see it, it's confirmation that the juice is successfully passing through your entire digestive system.
So consider yourselves thoroughly warned. Red is fine, it's just the beets doing their job.
Now let's pivot the focus. We have utilized the beetroot to engineer a massive systemic flush.
Driving heavy volumes of blood to the large skeletal muscles and major internal organs.
But what about the absolute furthest reaches of the vascular network?
What about the tiny microscopic blood vessels at the very tips of your toes and the ends of your fingers that have been slowly, quietly shutting down for decades?
This requires a highly specific distinction in vascular medicine.
Delivering a surge of blood through a massive wide-open femoral artery to supply your quadriceps is one physiological challenge.
Forcing blood to perfuse into the microscopic dead-end capillaries at the outer periphery of your body is a completely different, vastly more difficult challenge.
And that peripheral starvation is exactly what Dr. Lai's next intervention is designed to reverse, reviving the microcirculation network.
This brings us to the cayenne pepper tonic.
And frankly, this intervention sounds incredibly intense, bordering on a biological dare.
It is undeniably an intense sensory experience, but the underlying clinical pharmacology behind it is absolutely riveting.
This is specifically targeted at the demographic of adults over 60 who are plagued by chronic peripheral neuropathy symptoms.
Toes that are constantly numb, fingers that are perpetually freezing even in the summer.
Wounds on the lower legs that take weeks or months to heal, and thin skin that bruises at the slightest touch.
Every single one of those issues is a downstream symptom of microcirculatory failure.
Let's clearly define microcirculation for a moment to understand the architecture we are dealing with.
When we visualize the cardiovascular system, we usually picture the aorta, the major arteries, these big, robust tubes.
But the capillary beds are microscopic, right?
They are the absolute terminal branches of the vascular tree. Microcirculation governs the flow of blood through the tiniest, most delicate capillaries in the human body.
We are talking about vessels with a diameter so unbelievably small that your red blood cells literally have to deform their shape and line up to pass through them single file.
This microscopic network is the only place where the actual life-sustaining exchange of oxygen, nutrients, and cellular waste occurs.
If the major arteries are the interstate highways, the capillaries are the tiny dirt driveways leading to individual houses.
And as we age, those tiny dirt driveways get blocked off.
The tissue at the end of the line starts to literally starve to death from a lack of oxygen.
The source dictates that the key to forcefully reopening those microscopic, collapsed driveways is cayenne pepper.
More specifically, the active phytochemical inside the pepper, known as capsaicin.
Capsaicin is the precise alkaloid compound that gives hot peppers their signature fiery burn.
So this is where I need to push back and challenge the mechanism.
Okay, let's hear it.
When I go to a restaurant and eat a bowl of extremely hot salsa, my mouth feels like it's on fire, my face flushes, and my forehead starts to sweat.
Right.
But is that just a neurological illusion? Is capsaicin just tricking my pain receptors into screaming fire? Or is there actual, measurable, physiological heat and blood flow being generated?
That distinction is the crux of why this works. It is absolutely not just a neurological trick.
In the realm of clinical pharmacology, capsaicin is recognized as one of the most violently powerful natural vasodilators ever discovered.
The mechanism is fascinating. When capsaicin enters your system and binds to specific cellular receptors, specifically the TRPV1 receptors,
It triggers the surrounding nerve endings to dump a massive payload of two specific neuropeptides, substance P and calcitonin gene-related peptide, or CGRP.
And what do those neuropeptides do when they hit the bloodstream?
They act as extreme localized vasodilators. They directly assault the smooth muscle walls of the microscopic capillaries.
Forcing them to violently expand and open up.
So it's not just tricking the brain, it is physically prying the collapsed capillaries open.
Yes. And when those microscopic single-file capillaries are suddenly forced to dilate, fresh, highly oxygenated core blood comes rushing violently into tissues that have been starved of adequate flow for years.
The physical heat you feel radiating in your fingers and toes is not just the spice from the pepper.
It is the literal thermal heat of your own warm core blood returning to your peripheral extremities.
That is an incredible biological mechanism, and the clinical data firmly backs up the theory.
The source highlights a trial published in the journal Clinical Nutrition.
Researchers had participants consume a measured daily dose of capsaicin over a 4-week period.
At the end of the trial, they utilized Doppler ultrasound to measure a 26% improvement in peripheral blood flow.
26% more blood reaching the absolute outer edges of the human body.
And the research goes even deeper. A highly specialized study in the British Journal of Clinical Pharmacology focused exclusively on the older adult demographic.
They found that capsaicin interventions increased the actual microcirculatory flow, the single-file transit, through those delicate capillary beds by staggering 31%.
A 31% restoration of flow at the absolute cellular level.
That perfectly explains why this specific protocol is so crucial for issues like delayed wound healing.
If you are 65 and you get a scrape on your shin that just sits there, red and angry, refusing to close up for a month, it's not because your body forgot how to heal.
It's because the microscopic supply lines delivering the fibrin, the white blood cells, and the collagen to that specific square inch of skin are collapsed.
The raw materials can't get to the construction site.
You use the capsaicin to force those capillaries open by 31%, and suddenly the tissue has the exact supplies it needs to rebuild the skin.
Precisely. You are forcefully reopening the biological supply chains.
So, the mechanism is undeniable, but the practical application is terrifying.
How on earth do we formulate this cayenne tonic so that it absorbs effectively without simultaneously burning a permanent hole through our gastric lining?
Drinking straight, dry cayenne pepper sounds like an absolute nightmare.
The preparation parameters here are all about calculated restraint and utilizing the correct thermal dynamics of the water.
You do not start with a massive dose. You begin the preparation with a large mug of water.
The source specifies an absolute rule regarding the temperature. It must be comfortably warm water.
It cannot be boiling, and it cannot be ice cold. Why is the thermal state of the water so critical to the extraction?
It directly influences the rate of gastric absorption and mucosal irritation.
Warm water naturally soothes and relaxes the mucosal lining of the stomach, accelerating the rate at which the capsaicin dissolves and passes through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream.
If you drop spicy capsaicin into ice-cold water, the shock of the cold combined with the severe heat of the pepper can trigger violent, smooth muscle spasms in the stomach.
Leading to severe cramping. Warm water mitigates the spasm response.
Understood. Warm water is the buffer, and then for the dosage, you add a microscopic amount.
Just 1/8 of a teaspoon of high-quality cayenne pepper powder.
You stir that tiny amount until it is completely dissolved in the warm water.
1/8 of a teaspoon is a highly calculated subclinical starting dose.
When diluted in a large mug of warm water, it will not induce a painful burning sensation.
It will merely produce a gentle, radiating warmth in the back of your throat and down into your stomach.
The protocol dictates drinking this tonic once daily, optimally in the morning, about 30 minutes prior to eating breakfast.
The source mentions a titration schedule. Over the course of 2 straight weeks of daily consumption, as your gastric lining and pain receptors build a natural tolerance, you can very slowly graduate the dosage.
Up to a maximum of 1/4 of a teaspoon to maximize the microcirculatory flush.
And a practical note, if you find the earthy, spicy taste fundamentally intolerable, you can squeeze a wedge of fresh lemon into the mug.
The acidity of the lemon helps mask the flavor profile without chemically neutralizing the vasodilating power of the capsaicin.
However, before anyone rushes to the spice cabinet, we are obligated to issue a very severe, non-negotiable medical warning regarding this specific intervention.
Yes, the source material isolates this warning explicitly.
Because capsaicin is such a violently powerful vasodilator, and because it enhances peripheral blood flow so drastically, it profoundly interacts with systemic coagulation.
Therefore, any individual who is currently prescribed and taking pharmaceutical blood-thinning medications, drugs like warfarin, Plavix, or Eliquis, absolutely must consult with their primary care physician or cardiologist before attempting this protocol.
Capsaicin can radically compound and enhance the effects of prescription anticoagulants,
Which could easily tip the scales into dangerous bleeding complications. It is a highly bioactive compound, and it must be respected with clinical caution.
Safety protocols first, always. But for the vast majority of healthy adults, this is a brilliant, natural lever to push blood forcefully into tissues that have been silently suffocating.
Let's recap the biological architecture we've rebuilt so far.
We utilize the silica in cucumber and the rosmarinic acid in mint to patch the structural decay and restore flexibility to the major pipe walls.
We deployed the vitamin C and gingerols in the lemon ginger tonic to silence the hyperactive platelets and prevent the blood from clumping into traffic jams.
We engineered a massive, rapid systemic flush of nitric oxide, utilizing the enterosalivary nitrate pathway of beetroot juice.
And we forcefully pried open the microscopic dead-end capillaries in our furthest extremities, utilizing the neuropeptide release triggered by a warm cayenne pepper tonic.
We have addressed the structure, the flow, the systemic volume, and the microscopic periphery.
Which finally brings us to the absolute zenith of Dr. Lai's clinical experimentation, the single most powerful intervention.
This is the ultimate arterial remodeling protocol.
The source material emphasizes that this final botanical intervention produced the most jaw-dropping, dramatic clinical results that vascular researchers have ever recorded in a natural health study.
It doesn't just support blood vessels. It actively remodels them in a way that no other natural ingredient on Earth can match.
To the point where its efficacy goes toe-to-toe with advanced pharmaceutical medications.
The biological heavyweight champion of this entire protocol is hibiscus.
More specifically, the heavily pigmented, dried calices of the flower Hibiscus sabdurifa.
Hibiscus. Once again, we are faced with an ingredient that sounds incredibly gentle, a lovely tart tea you might be served at a high-end garden party.
But locked inside the deep red pigment of those delicate flower petals is an overwhelmingly potent concentration of bioactive phytochemicals known as anthocyanins and polyphenols.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to return to the concept of arterial stiffness.
When your major arteries are stiff and rigid, they lose the ability to passively expand and contract.
They cannot ride the wave of the heartbeat to push the blood forward.
Consequently, the heart muscle is forced to pump with significantly more violent force, just to shove the liquid through a rigid, unyielding pipe network.
And the anthocyanins loaded inside the hibiscus petals attack that systemic stiffness through a dual-pronged mechanism, right?
They execute a highly synchronized, two-front biochemical assault on vascular aging.
First, they dramatically upregulate the endothelial availability of nitric oxide, forcefully demanding that the smooth muscles relax.
But the second mechanism is where the true miracle of hibiscus lies.
The anthocyanins actively hunt down and neutralize the deeply embedded oxidative stress damage inside the endothelial cells themselves.
Let's make sure that mechanism is crystal clear. It isn't just shouting at the vessel to relax.
It is actively repairing the localized damage that was preventing the vessel from hearing the chemical shout in the first place.
Exactly. We have to visualize the cellular receptors on the blood vessel as intricate lock keyholes.
Over 60 years of life, systemic oxidative stress, poor diet, and environmental toxins fill those delicate keyholes with biological gunk and rust.
Nitric oxide is the perfect chemical key, but when it tries to enter the lock, it can't slide in because the keyhole is packed with oxidized debris.
The signal is blocked. The vessel stays stiff no matter how much nitric oxide is floating around in the bloodstream.
Precisely. The heavy anthocyanins in the hibiscus act as a potent biochemical solvent.
They wash over the endothelial layer, actively dissolving and clearing the oxidative gunk out of the receptor keyholes.
Suddenly, the nitric oxide keys can slide perfectly into the locks, turn the mechanism, and the vessel violently dilates.
The clinical results of this specific cellular clearing process are unparalleled.
The source highlights a landmark double-blind clinical trial published in the highly respected Journal of Human Hypertension.
They tracked a cohort of older adults with an average age of 65.
After consuming an active hibiscus formulation daily for a period of 6 weeks, the researchers measured a staggering 44% improvement in the participants' flow-mediated dilation.
Wait, a 44% improvement in a single metric. We need to clearly define that metric.
What exactly is flow-mediated dilation, and why is a 44% jump so monumental?
Flow-mediated dilation, universally abbreviated as FMD, is the absolute, undisputed clinical gold standard for evaluating real-world vascular health.
It is an ultrasound technique that physically measures exactly how much a major artery expands and widens in direct response to a sudden surge of blood flow, a process known as reactive hyperemia.
A 44% improvement in FMD is a number that leaves cardiologists speechless.
That level of rapid structural improvement rivals and in some cases exceeds the clinical effects of advanced synthetic prescription medications designed explicitly to treat severe vascular disease.
And the data is corroborated. A secondary major trial published in the journal Phytotherapy confirmed that a concentrated hibiscus protocol reduced overall arterial stiffness by 17% in just 4 weeks.
It isn't just a temporary boost, it is literally physically reversing the biological aging process of the arterial wall.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and this is arguably the most critical operational caveat in this entire deep dive. You cannot simply go to the kitchen and brew a hot cup of hibiscus tea.
If you're listening right now, pay extremely close attention to this preparation rule.
If you boil water and drop a hibiscus tea bag into it, you are actively destroying the entire protocol.
You are sabotaging the biochemistry. The source is absolutely uncompromising on this specific point.
You must exclusively utilize a cold brew extraction method.
The miracle compounds we are trying to harvest, the anthocyanins, are highly thermolable.
That means they are highly sensitive to heat degradation.
If you expose hibiscus petals to water temperatures exceeding 70 degrees Celsius, which is well below boiling, the thermal energy physically shatters the delicate molecular structure of the anthocyanins,
Instantly denaturing them. If you brew hot hibiscus tea, you are drinking red-colored water.
The specific circulatory benefits are entirely annihilated.
So how do we correctly and safely extract these compounds without destroying them?
The cold brew extraction is a slow, methodical process. You begin by sourcing high-quality, dried, whole hibiscus petals, often sold as flor de Jamaica.
You take 2 full tablespoons of the dried petals and place them into a large glass vessel.
You then pour approximately 1 liter of cold, heavily filtered water directly over the petals.
Cold water only. Room temperature or colder.
Cold water exclusively. You seal the glass vessel, place it in your refrigerator, and you walk away.
The steep time must be an absolute minimum of 8 hours.
However, the source data strongly indicates that a full 12-hour steep leaving it overnight provides the maximum possible extraction yield.
The cold water acts incredibly gently, slowly pulling the delicate, intact anthocyanins out of the plant fiber without applying any denaturing thermal stress.
When you wake up the next morning, you strain the spent petals out of the liquid.
What you are left with is an intensely deep, crimson, highly tart liquid.
The source compares the flavor profile to a strong, unsweetened cranberry juice.
Your goal is to consume that entire liter of cold brew progressively throughout the day, dividing it into 3 or 4 glasses.
If the tartness is too astringent for your palate, you are permitted to stir in a small amount of raw honey to balance the acidity.
The cadence of consumption is vital here. You do not chug the entire liter at breakfast.
Spreading the consumption out over 12 hours ensures that your endothelial cells receive a continuous, uninterrupted IV drip supply of these oxidative stress-clearing compounds,
Keeping the receptor keyholes clean all day long.
The source also makes a point to note the accessibility of this intervention. You don't need a prescription.
Dried hibiscus petals are incredibly cheap and ubiquitous. You can find massive bags of them at local health food stores, international markets, or easily order them online for pennies a serving.
But the final overarching rule regarding the ultimate arterial reset of hibiscus is that it is absolutely not a fast-acting, one-time fix.
The clinical data requires time to manifest. You are attempting to progressively reconstruct vascular receptor function that has been silently degrading for 30 or 40 years.
A single glass of cold brew hibiscus on a Tuesday afternoon is not going to magically undo decades of arterial stiffening.
But rigorous, daily, unwavering consistency over a period of 6 weeks.
That is the exact clinical window where you trigger the 44% improvement in flow-mediated dilation.
It must transition from an experiment into a non-negotiable daily biological habit.
So what does this massive paradigm shift mean for you, the listener, right now?
Let's synthesize the exhaustive journey we've just mapped out.
We started with Dr. Lay's profound realization that as we cross that 60-year threshold, forcing down gallons of plain water isn't enough.
Because our internal cardiovascular plumbing physically stops responding to the hydration. But he provided the exact biochemical keys to wake the system back up.
We detailed how to rebuild the physical pipe walls and restore lost flexibility utilizing the silica and rosmarinic acid hidden in cucumber and mint.
We broke down how to prevent your blood cells from clumping into dangerous traffic jams, using the vitamin C and gingerol pathways in lemon and raw ginger.
We explored the rapid, practically instantaneous systemic flush of nitric oxide generated by the enterosalivary nitrate pathway of diluted beetroot juice.
We ventured into the microscopic terminal capillary beds, forcefully reviving the dead-end circulation in your numb toes and cold fingers using the neuropeptide release triggered by a warm cayenne pepper tonic.
And finally, we uncovered the ultimate arterial remodeling protocol, achieving a staggering 44% improvement in vascular dilation simply by respecting the thermolabile nature of anthocyanins and cold brewing hibiscus petals.
And the overarching unifying theme of this entire deep dive, the core clinical takeaway that cannot be overstated, is that aging safely and fiercely maintaining your physical vitality is not about sheer volume of hydration.
It is fundamentally about actively changing how your aging body is chemically instructed to utilize the water you provide it.
Not a single one of these 5 interventions requires a doctor's prescription. Not one of them is prohibitively expensive or locked behind a pharmaceutical paywall.
And every single biological mechanism we discussed today is rigorously validated by published, peer-reviewed clinical trials.
Your blood vessels, regardless of how stiff they feel today, regardless of how incredibly heavy and fatigued your legs feel right this second, possess a miraculous innate biological capacity to recover.
They can physically rebuild and improve at any age, provided they are finally given the correct chemical instructions.
You do not have to overhaul your life and start brewing all 5 of these tomorrow morning.
The source material strongly advises picking just one, whichever intervention targets your most frustrating symptom, building ironclad consistency with it, and actively monitoring how your body wakes up and responds.
It is entirely about taking back control of the biological instructions you are sending to your own tissues.
Precisely.
Which leaves us with one final, profound thought to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. If the simple, quiet act of soaking a dried flower petal in cold water overnight can unlock a 44% improvement in arterial dilation,
A result that literally rivals the clinical efficacy of modern engineered prescription vascular medications.
what other miraculous latent healing pathways are sitting entirely dormant inside your cells right now, just waiting for you to introduce the exact right natural compound to finally turn them back on?